Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Rubio, welcome. The United States is at its most dangerous time in our history since World War II. And we know, we can see what Russia's done in Europe. We know the increasing aggression of communist China, Iran, North Korea. I want to hit upon Iran real quickly here. As you know, this is a theocracy that's got brutal mullahs and corrupt military. They chant death to America, death to Israel. You've had 4 rounds of negotiations with them so far, and I think you framed it best when you said earlier this month they have to walk away from sponsoring terrorists, they have to walk away from helping Houthis, they have to walk away from building long-range missiles that have no purpose to exist other than having nuclear weapons, and they have to walk away from enrichment. That was your quote earlier. And that enrichment is particularly important, as you've stated, and Steve Witkoff reemphasized over the weekend, the ability to enrich at 3.67% for a civilian program. It only takes a few weeks to get to 90% for a military-grade weapon. Now, what I'd like you to just talk about real briefly is, what are you thinking about when you say they've got to get rid of their nuclear program, they've got to have complete disarmament? Is it still the policy that they cannot be allowed to enrich at all in Iran?
Thank you. Well, obviously, these are ongoing, I hope to be ongoing negotiations, because the alternative would be far worse, in my view, but maybe necessary. But we hope that we can reach an agreement with Iran. So here's the baseline that I've described to everybody on it. If what Iran wants is a civil nuclear program, energy, you know, the ability to develop nuclear energy, there's a model for that multiple countries around the world currently follow. And that allows them to build reactors and then bring in enriched material and use it to generate electricity. And that's a model that will be available to Iran, potentially, if they choose to take it. If, on the other hand, they want to retain enrichment capability. And I just described this because if anyone's watching this or in the future, this can get a little complex. All of you understand it, but for the general public, it's important when you get into the details of this. Once you know how to enrich at any level, all you need is time to be able to enrich at a higher level. And they've already proven the ability to enrich at a higher level. In fact, they have, and are doing so now. In fact, their legislative branch passed a law requiring them to break JCPOA and enrich way beyond, almost well beyond 60%. So you're absolutely right. About 90% of the work of enrichment is getting to that 3.67 level. After that, the rest of it is just a matter of time, not to mention what the gap is from the 20% for medical isotopes, which is the other thing they insist upon. So the Iranian position is that they don't just want energy. They claim that enrichment is a matter of national pride. It is our view that they want enrichment as a deterrent. They believe that it makes them a threshold nuclear power and as a result becomes untouchable. And that is the crux of the situation we're facing right now. And there are other actors, and I won't go much deeper into that, but there are other nation states in the region that are also range from uncomfortable all the way to view as an existential threat the belief that Iran could ever be in a position of maintaining its enrichment capability in the long term that could quickly be weaponized. So that is the basis upon which we are negotiating with the Iranians. Our hope is that we can encourage them to show them a path towards prosperity and peace that allow them to develop their economy, that allow them, if they want, to have a civil nuclear energy program like other countries around the world have without enrichment. And it's our hope we can encourage them in that direction. The president has been very clear, and I won't elaborate any further, that they are never going to get a nuclear weapon. That is not going to happen. But he much prefer, I much prefer, and I would venture to guess all of you would much prefer, if we could reach an arrangement where they agree to this off-ramp, to this pathway towards prosperity and peace, as opposed to the road they have been on for the last 20 years. And it will not be easy. But that's the process we're engaged in now.
Right, thanks. So let's go to communist China, because they're the greatest existential threat that we face as a nation. We both agreed last time you were before this committee that we need an all-of-government, not just an all-government, but we also need an all-of-society approach on how we face communist China. This was illustrated in a recent table talk exercise that I did with Sarah Coons and others, and I'm talking about contingency where Beijing tries to do an energy quarantine on Taiwan to force them to capitulate. And obviously unlocking Americans' energy is one of the ways that we can help counter this with LNG and biofuels, some of our strongest tools to be able to help our allies and partners. Cutting red tape, unleashing American energy in the private sector, we're positioned to be an energy supplier here of choice. but we need the infrastructure in place, and that includes having a West Coast LNG terminal. Can you talk a little bit about what you're thinking about when it comes to this type of contingency with regard to an energy quarantine in Taiwan and how the administration would approach that?
Well, first of all, we're devastating. The U.S., as you know, has agreements in place and assurances it's made on maintaining the status quo in that region, and those will remain viable without trying to be alarmist here. We know what those are, and we hope that never happens. But I think the broader issue that you touch upon, which I don't think is widely understood, again, members of the committee who follows this closely understand it, but more broadly, is the dangerous imbalance that has developed between China and the rest of the world on a number of fronts. The first is on access to rare earth minerals, which they have secured access rights all over the world on virtually every continent. They are predominant and or leading in their access. And it's one of the points of frustration that I have. You go to a country and you see how much money we've given in humanitarian aid, but when it comes to rare earth mineral rights and exploited, rights to natural resources, it's all on the Chinese side. So where's the connection between the aid we give to help countries survive and the fact that the Chinese are going in and somehow from these governments, bribery or otherwise, getting a hold of all these rare earth minerals and leases and contracts all over the place, not just in Africa, in Latin America, all over the place. The second is processing. They process all these rare earth elements. So we are literally, if they decide one day we're going to cut the world off, and they've threatened to do so to some extent with these trade negotiations, you won't be able to build an engine in this country. You won't be able to build a rocket or any of the things that we use in daily life. This is a very dangerous situation that's developed that has to be addressed as well. A lot of it will require domestic changes in our own country and building up our own domestic capabilities, for example, to refine rare earth minerals and to process, but also just to make things. Pharmaceuticals, another dangerous imbalance. We were, all this talk about them getting close to the Europeans, they're dumping on the European market. They're dumping electric cars. They're dumping all kinds of products because they're overproducing. They don't consume. So they dump all these products onto the European marketplace. But you know what the Europeans are very concerned about, the Italians in particular? They used to lead the world in pharmaceuticals, at least in the precursors and the key elements and the basic ingredients. Now the Chinese dominate 80-something% of that industry. They could cut off our medicine. So I think when you talk about energy, I could apply that to a host of critical industries in the 21st century. If we don't address that imbalance, which is what we're hoping to do with some of the trade proposals, but also domestic matters that the administration is taking on, we're going to be in real tough shape here very soon if we're not already.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I see my time is up, but I look forward to continuing to talk with you about how we can create this all-of-society strategy to be able to fight back against Communist China, because you just laid out a lot of the things that we're at risk at, and we have to have a way to be able to push back on them so that they don't decide to try to take Taiwan by force or try to do an energy quarantine, which could lead to a war which would be devastating for everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.